Hello, and welcome back to the Women's Rugby Show Weekly podcast. I am Sam Byther, and we are back again with episode 8 of the podcast. We had a little week off last week due to some technical issues, but we are back again this week. This week, we'll be headed into the Saracens camp to hear from Alex Austerberry and Sophie de Goede ahead of their game against Leicester Tigers this weekend. We'll also be bringing you a PWR roundup and also touching on a historic win for the Trailfinders over the weekend. We're heading back into our BUCS roundups, and we'll be speaking to Loughborough University's Issy Winter ahead of their massive game against Exeter University on Wednesday as we listen to this today. And we'll also be rounding up the news from across the world from Sevens, the Elite One Feminine, and also some more Celtic Challenge news as well. Before we get into that, if you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, make sure you head over to Instagram because at the end of this week, we'll be having a preview of the game we'll be heading to this weekend between Sale Sharks and Loughborough Lightning with an interview from a couple of the Sharks players. So make sure you don't miss that one. And also all our other graphical content and news content we put out there regularly on our Instagram and social media channels. If you're watching this on Instagram or on YouTube, make sure you head over to Apple Podcasts or Spotify Podcasts so you can download this episode and listen to me on the go. If you don't know that, well, let's get into this one. As we mentioned in our little preamble there, it was a massive win for the Trailfinders over the weekend against Leicester Tigers. It's such a famous win. That win actually takes them up to fifth in the table. Obviously, there's been so much reshuffle due to a couple of postponements, which we'll touch on in a minute. And then Bristol bounced back from there, a couple of defeats with a win away at Loughborough Lightning. Loughborough Lightning sporting that new Northampton Saints-inspired kit at home, which is interesting considering that was their away kit, but sporting at home in Northampton colours at Franklin's Gardens. So it's quite good to see the kind of resemblance of the two teams linking up even more now. And also the other result of the weekend was Exeter winning away comfortably against Harlequins. I think Harlequins are really struggling this season. It's going to be something that they need to kind of pick up sharpish, otherwise it's going to be a struggle. But a massive success for them in that game was the first try in Quinn's colours for Ella Cromack. She's going to be a superstar for England and Quins in the future, and I'm sure she's just going to grow more and more throughout the season. But like I mentioned, we can just need to touch on a couple of those postponements. It's happened 2 weeks in a row, both for Sale Sharks. One of them, their home ground at Hayward Road, the pitch was frozen. As Exeter got up there, it got cancelled. And I think it's something that needs to be managed more and more, that especially over this winter. But last week's one that was this disappointing one even more for Sale and Gloucester Hartpury is the game got cancelled as both teams are there warmed up due to the lack of medical cover. We understand that an ambulance did eventually arrive, but this was after the two teams decided to postpone the game. I believe it was about 3:15 the game got called off, and about 3:40 the ambulance arrived. And I think obviously there's not much that Gloucester Hartpury can do. There's not much that the Sharks can do. But it's happened way too many times in the past P15s, happened a couple of times to Worcester, a couple of times to Wasps. And I think it's really disappointing that we're still seeing this happening as we are growing into a more professional setup in the league. And I think it's something that obviously it's tough to manage, but it's something that needs to be improved heading forward. On a more positive note, heading into this weekend, like I mentioned, 4 more games in the PWR. Bears versus Trailfinders. Trailfinders probably going to look to back up their win this weekend. Sharks versus Lightning at Hayward Road. That is a game we'll be heading to this weekend. A repeat of last year's P15's final in the PWR with Exeter Chiefs hosting Gloucester Hartpury. That's going to be a cracker. I'm really excited to see that one. That is a game live on TNT Sport. And finally, Saracens hosting newcomers Leicester Tigers. And we've ended that one last because we are going to speak to now Alex Austerberry and Sophie de Goede from Saracens ahead of that game this weekend. Hi, Sophie. Hope you're well. Just quick few ones from me kind of around coming back to league. Just how much are you enjoying being back kind of in a Saracens shirt? It's been a couple of years away from the PWR and Saracens, but just how much are you enjoying being back?
Yeah, it's been great. Like I think something that I miss being in Canada is just quality games every weekend. And that's what we can get here. And it's one of the strongest domestic leagues, I think, probably, if not the strongest across the world. So it's a privilege to be able to play in this league and alongside so many great players, whether they're internationals or club players. Everyone here is of a high quality. So definitely feel lucky and fortunate to be in the league, let alone at Sarries and at a team with the likes of the players that we have here and the staff that we have and the resources. It's such a great setup. And so it was I feel really fortunate that they wanted me back and that I got the opportunity to come back. And hopefully it continues to be a good partnership.
I can say, what kind of brought you back? What was the chats around with Alex about coming back? When was that kind of start to happen?
Yeah, like Alex and I have had kind of not really a proper relationship, but he watched me play when our Canadian U18 team came over and played against the TDG England team back in like, I think it would have been like 2016. He got in touch with me after that about Sarries, and it wasn't. I went to university, so it wasn't the time then. But then when COVID hit, I got in touch with him about coming back over, um, and then again the second time around, he was one of the first people I contacted, and he contacted me as well, and we just had some good chats over the phone about what it could look like, and I'm really happy with the decision to come back here because I think it's the best environment for me on a daily basis to continue growing.
Do you feel like the league has kind of changed at all in those couple of years since you've been away?
I think just the depth across the league is outstanding, and it continues to get better every year. And I think there's a lot of parity amongst teams, and so it's great to go in every weekend knowing that you're going to have to put up a fight and prepare for each team that you come up against. And so it's not that it wasn't like that last time we were here, but I think just seeing the development and growth of the league, and both on field and off field, in terms of like the professionalism and the media and the staff and the way that everything is structured within the league, has just continued to grow. And I think it'll continue to do that exponentially each year. So it's exciting to be involved in it.
And obviously, there's plenty of other of your Canadian teammates kind of dotted around throughout the league. Just how important is having regular play time for them going forward for the national team as well?
Yeah, it's huge. And I think we're really fortunate to do it in a league, as I was just saying, of this quality. And playing back home in Canada, most parts of the country, the season's quite short over the summer because then you're hit with snow for 6 months of the year. So it's nice to be able to play all through the fall and winter here and just get quality games in every weekend. And I think, and then not to mention the daily training environment. So I think being in that environment, being in this league for seasons at a time is really helpful for us when we come back to the national team. And it also gives us exposures to different styles of play and different ways of thinking that they have here versus back home. So yeah, overall, it's really positive.
Perfect. Thanks, Sophie.
Thank you.
There was a week off from games last weekend. Just how did that make the training week differ the week before, and how did you, as a coaching setup, kind of change your week around that?
Well, to be honest, it's no different to how the season's been structured previously. You have a few games in a row, and then there's that reserve week that's happened. So we've got a lot of experience in terms of managing that. As I said, we had a tough game against Harlequins. So Tuesday was a little bit lighter, and then it was ramped up on Thursday, where probably that differs. Monday we gave the players the kind of the day off as a TFD, so it was allowed us just to get a bit of regen in there, and then, like say, ramp it up towards the back end of the week. But I think the really probably difference in their schedule is that the Saturday there was a team bonding event where I think they went and played some bingo. And I think that's immensely valuable, just as much as rest and recovery is enjoying the time with one another is really important. So that was a little bit different to a normal week, but yeah, it's not something new to us in being able to manage those weeks where we don't have fixtures. So like I said, we know how to taper and then how to change the week so that we can get the maximum out of it. And we hopefully we'll see that bounce this week.
Did you have much chance to catch any of the other rugby elsewhere this weekend?
Yeah. I think we're all pretty rugby noses if you go across the world of rugby, right? So wherever there's rugby on, we'll find it. So yeah, watched whether it be live, whether it be some of the Champions Cup or whatever its official title is, or whether it be the games that did play in the league at the weekend. So yeah, I think irrespective of whether or not Saracens are playing, we make sure that we're up to speed with not just the team that we play in the next, but also we've got fixtures this side of Christmas where we've got to make sure that we're seeing the trends, seeing things that those teams are doing differently, so that we're ahead in terms of our analysis rather than trying to catch up, because what it's like, the world is a very busy place, certainly in women's rugby, and you got to make sure you do your work early, because if you leave it late, you'll get found out.
Perfect. Cheers, Alex. Thank you. Moving on now to our regular BUCS roundup, and we'll be looking at the results first of all from last week before we chat to Loughborough's Issy Winter about this week's game they have against Exeter. So last week, Exeter had a massive win against Cardiff, 83-0 at home. Edinburgh won at home, to Cardiff Met, which is a massive result at the top of the table, narrowing the gap massively. And Hartpury won away at Loughborough, which is also a really big result for them heading forward. And then the table after that game, after the week 11 results, we're not calling it round 11 because nobody's played 11 games, as I keep saying. Cardiff Met sit top, having played 9, are on 30 points. Edinburgh in second, played 9, 27 points. This is where it gets a little closer now, because Hartpury sit in third, played 6 with 26 points. Edinburgh in fourth, Exeter in fourth, played 6, 24 points. Loughborough as well, played 7 on 20 in fifth. Cardiff in sixth, played 9 with 8, and Durham in seventh in last place, played 6 with 5 points. Fixtures this week, there's a massive Welsh derby at Cardiff Arms Park, with Cardiff taking on Cardiff Met. Exeter play Loughborough in the game we're going to be talking about with Issy in a minute. And also Edinburgh host Hartpury, which is a massive game at the top of the table. It's really important for kind of deciding what's going to happen further down the line in the tournament in terms of playoffs. So it's a massive game up in Edinburgh, But the one we're going to be focusing on this week is Loughborough against Exeter, with Loughborough University's Issy Winter. So Issy, just first of all, thank you so much for chatting to us this evening. Just can you briefly kind of introduce yourself and describe your role within the Loughborough team, please?
Okay, yeah, I'm Issy Winter. I obviously am studying at Loughborough. I'm studying mathematics, and in my final year now. I've just come back from a placement away at home, which is just north of London in Hertfordshire. And my role within the team, I guess, probably a forwards lead within the team. Probably one of the leadership roles within the team, definitely. I think specifically the leadership role within Loughborough, and especially for this BUCS 1 team, it's a collaborative effort. There's not one specific person. Obviously, we have a captain per game, but it feels as though a lot of people put their hands up and take lots of leadership within that. So I would definitely also consider myself one of those. Yeah.
You mentioned home being kind of North London, but how have you kind of got yourself to Loughborough in terms of rugby?
Well, it's kind of a funny story, actually. I knew I wanted to do mathematics at university. I just had to decide where. And I picked up rugby just the year before I started university for my Gold Duke of Edinburgh award. I needed a new sport, and turns out I did rugby and I absolutely loved it. So I knew that I wanted to play that at university, and it was just decided where. And I think Loughborough just shone out of everywhere else that I applied for. So, and considering the pathway that they had shown that was available to everyone, I was like, yes, definitely, that's where I want to go. So that's kind of how I ended up at Loughborough. And I arrived here during the pandemic. So actually, I didn't get to play much rugby in my first year, but then got the massive opportunity in my second year to get going, get started on that. And it was a really competitive year, my second year. So that was 2 years ago. And the league, specifically the BUCS Super League, is so competitive. And it's such an amazing league. And there's so many opportunities for young girls to play rugby. So that was also one of the reasons why I chose this university. Yeah.
And kind of just looking at the season so far, how do you kind of feel it's gone, and how important is bouncing back this week after a loss last week?
Yeah, well, I was away last year, obviously, and the morale from the girls last year was very much not very positive from the way that the season had gone last year. And coming back into the program and the pathway, and being here at pre-season, training with Lightning, and being with all the girls back again, it very much feels like this year has just sort of started off with a bang, and everyone's really bought into the system and to the pathway and the way that we want to play rugby. And I kind of feel as though we have started off slightly the season the way we wanted to, but not fully, because each game we get to prove different aspects of what we want to do and the team we want to be, but just not all at the same time. I think each week we show different parts of what we can do, but not everything at the same time. And I think we have the girls to win every single game. It's whether we turn up on the day and we get to prove what we want to do. So so far, it's been really positive. Even if we have a loss, even losing last week against Hartpury, I think you can't really fault our defensive effort and the grind and the dog that we had last week to be able to keep Hartpury out for so long. I don't think we knew that was going to happen, or expected that from ourselves, but we all looked around at
10 minutes into the game, we thought we can do this. And I think it was although we lost, it was a really positive game for us because we showed each other that we can do it, and we can pull the defensive effort together. It's just getting the attacking piece right and getting it there on the day. I think we can beat any team that we want to beat. So yeah.
You mentioned that kind of anybody can beat anyone. You've seen it already, the kind of the top of the table, especially with the kind of top five around that. Anybody can beat anyone. Does that kind of make the league so exciting and so kind of special to play in?
Yeah, you can't compare it, honestly. So last year I played in Champ 1 South for Old Albanian Saints, and Champ 1 South is such a different kind of game to the university game because obviously physically the girls are so much bigger because everyone's older, and the Champ 1 game is so much more of a physical side, whereas at university it's so fast. Everyone's young and fit, and the game is played so much quicker. And I think, especially my second year and going into this year, it's just such a competitive year. You don't know who's going to win. You don't know who's going to turn it around, win at the end of the year. Then even if you win at the end of the year, that doesn't mean that you then go into the quarters and then win the whole cup. It's always such an exciting game, whichever game you play, and whoever you get to play and it's just who turns up on the day. I think anyone can win through the whole league. Doesn't matter who, it's just if you turn up and you can do it and you put it together as a team. I think it's so competitive. It's just such an amazing league.
What has your kind of preparation look like since last week heading into Exeter tomorrow?
We very much took away from the Exeter game so many positive things in terms of even the bad parts. We know where we need to improve and we know what we need to change. And it's just working on, it's practice makes perfect, really. Personally, I felt as though our set piece sort of let us down last week. And it meant that we couldn't have an attacking platform to work off. When we did attack, Cartbury couldn't live with us. So I think collating everything together, getting things practice and understanding our roles and making sure that we know that going into Wednesday so that we don't have to second guess ourselves. We don't have to think that we need to give extra parts to be able to win because we can win. It's just putting it together on the day. And I think in terms of our preparation, it hasn't really changed. It's more focusing on different areas. So specifically for us for this week was getting that set piece right, getting the attacking formation right. We know that we can now defensively put in a shift and put a performance out on the day. It's just making sure we have all those other aspects that sort of tie together. And we want to play the game that we want to play. We don't want to let other teams play their game. We want to show up on the day and prove that we want to be there and prove that we're going to win every day. So yeah, I think it's just practicing in the right areas for that specific game and analysing the other team and knowing what we're going to be up against and being able to mitigate anything that they're going to do. So yeah.
And you kind of touched on this, but how important do you find BUCS as kind of a pathway for rugby in the future for you?
Well, rugby in the future for me is so up in the air all the time. I think one aspect of making me want to go further with my career, especially been this pathway at Loughborough, because 2 years ago, you can't compare it actually, the pathway that it is today to how it was 2 years ago, because if I based on where I want to go in rugby 2 years ago, I would have had a completely different answer because it just isn't anything like it is right now. Before, it would have been, there was such a big leap between BUCS and the Premiership rugby, and especially at Loughborough. The thought of being able to play Premiership rugby was quite far out in the distance if you weren't able to put the constant performances every week in BUCS. Whereas now they've spent so much time in developing the training squad and the development with certain players and having those hybrid players who train all week with both BUCS and Lightning, and everyone gets the opportunity. If you play well, if you train well and you show up, you do get the opportunity and you do get rewarded. And it's having that commitment and knowing if you put the hard work in, you can get where you want to be. And I think it's so exciting at the moment just because of the opportunities that are available, whereas before they weren't necessarily that available as before. But now the holes have opened up. You get more training, you get more development, and you get so much more learning opportunities. Like I've done probably the most amount of learning I've ever done in the past 3 or 4 months than I have the whole of last year or the year before that, just because of the exposure that I've had, just to different, you just learn on the go, and you just realize that you've gone so much further in such a short amount of time. Just looking in the mirror and you think, oh my God, I'm such a different player than I was 3 months ago, just because I've not played in the Premiership, but still having that exposure within training and having just the ins and outs of team meetings, or even speaking to the girls and them giving you advice, can be the difference between you knowing where you need to be in this part of the game to before. So yeah, I think the pathway has definitely been a motivation for me to continue and prove to be the player that I want to be, wherever that takes me. Obviously, I have to focus on my education also, and my career, wherever that's going to be. But I really hope that I can continue my rugby career wherever I am, and develop it further than I already have. So yeah.
And finally, just kind of what are your aims for this Loughborough side on the pitch this year, and also kind of your rugby performance on this pitch this year as well?
I think the aims specifically for this team is just building something each week towards the end of the year and being able to show what we can do. We often find that within training, we're showing everything that we can do, and wanting to be able to put that on the pitch out on a Wednesday is just something that we need to tackle and actually perfect, I think. That's probably what we want to work on over the year, and being able to put out performances every week, not just one every 4 weeks, because depending on who the opposition was, we want to get to the point where we don't care who the opposition is. They're going to play our game, and we're going to find a way to win. I think that's definitely the aim for the whole season. I think for me, just developing as much as I can and taking the opportunity as much as I can, because if this is my last year, then this is going to be my last opportunity to be within this environment and to take up as many opportunities as I can, get as much learning in as I can, and get that exposure and experience. So, yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much for chatting today, and best of luck for tomorrow, and best of luck for the rest of the season.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sam.
And finally, for this week, we are moving on to our news segment of the podcast, where we look around all the women's rugby news from around the world. Starting off in France, and the Elite One Feminine continued this weekend with plenty of interesting results across Pool 1 and Pool 2. In Pool 1, Stade Villeneuve beat Bobigny 25-10, Montpellier hammers Stade Francais 64-0, and Stade Bordelais beat ASA Romanat 14-5. In Pool 2, the Grenoble Amazons won 17-12 at Lyon. Pau lost at home to Blagnac 2012, and Toulouse won at home to Stade Rennais 32-0. Moving on to sevens, and Australia went back-to-back in the HSB 7 Series with wins in Dubai and Cape Town. Two massive wins for them. First of all, ending Australia and ending New Zealand's unbeaten streak in the 7 Series. I think it was about 41 games in the end when it ended in the Dubai final, and then going back-to-back, winning that again in Cape Town the week after beating France in the final. A couple of big stories from that was Madison Levi hit 100 World Series tries over in Cape Town, and also the Blackburn 7, Michaela Blyde, reached 200 World Series tries in Cape Town. That's just the second woman ever to do that as well, which is just so impressive. In the standings after two events over in the HSB 7 Series, Australia sit top after 2 wins, France are in second, New Zealand in third, Fiji in fourth, Canada in fifth, the USA in sixth, Ireland in seventh, Brazil in eighth, GB sit in 9th place, Japan are in 10th, South Africa are 11th, and Spain sit 12th. And moving on finally, before the end of this episode, to the Celtic Challenge, in both Glasgow Warriors and Edinburgh Rugby have announced their two head coaches, for the tournament starter, which is starting very soon, the end of the month. Chris Laidlaw will be coaching the Glasgow Warriors, where Claire Cruikshank will be coaching Edinburgh Rugby. Claire is the head coach over at Edinburgh University as well, so there's the links there already. It's going to be really interesting to see how they develop that pathway heading forward to throughout the Celtic Challenge, and how much they integrate those academy and university players in there as well. Thank you so much for listening or watching to this episode of the Women's Rugby Show Weekly podcast with me, Sam, by the way. Like I mentioned at the start, if you are listening to this over on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, make sure you head over to our Instagram for a preview of Sale Shots against Loughborough Lightning, which will be coming out on Friday morning, and also all our other graphics and news and team sheets that come out across our social platforms. And also, if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you head over to Spotify or Apple Podcasts to download this and listen to us on the go in future. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week.